Hey everybody, it's Jason with Parallel Reality coming back with you today with an article from December 4th from the Daily Signal, and it's entitled, "These Two Laws Allow the President to Use Troops for Immigration Enforcement." And ever since Trump won the election, there's been a lot of screeching from the left about Trump can't use the Army or the National Guard or whoever to force, to get the illegals out of here. And it turns out, of course, all those people saying that are 100% wrong. So let's go ahead and get into this. It says President-elect Donald Trump's confirmation last month of his plan to deploy military assets for immigration enforcement sparked a constitutional debate. Legal scholars and commentators quickly declared such action forbidden by long-standing prohibitions on military involvement in domestic law enforcement. But this conventional wisdom misreads both the letter and spirit of American law. A careful examination of a pair of long-standing statutes reveals military support for immigration enforcement is permissible. Excuse me, just got the hiccups somehow. I haven't even drank or eaten anything. It says the issue hinges on two 19th century laws, the Posse Comitatus Act of 1878 and the Insurrection Act of 1807. So we're going way back for both of these. Because when properly understood, both allow the president to use active duty military forces to support the deportation of illegal immigrants. And next section here says Posse Comitatus, a firewall between the military and law enforcement. Since our nation's founding, Americans have been wary of standing armies and their role in civilian affairs. Concerns about military involvement in domestic law enforcement dates back to colonial experiences under British rule, particularly the quartering of British troops in civilian homes and their use to enforce British law. This experience was so troubling that it influenced several key elements of the Constitution and Bill of Rights. The Third Amendment, ratified in 1791, explicitly prohibits American soldiers from occupying private homes inside the county during peacetime. Inside the county or country. I don't know if they meant to put country there, but anyone out there that knows about this much better than me, which is practically anybody, please let me know if they meant to say country there, because I think they did. Anywho, back to the article. It says the Posse Comitatus Act of 1878, informed by a distrust of a large military force employed against its citizenry, codified the separation of military and civilian law enforcement. This act established a firewall between military force and civilian law enforcement. The term Posse Comitatus, Latin for power of the country, dates back to the medieval England tradition of local sheriffs organizing citizens to assist in maintaining public order. A form of this practice made its way to the American Old West. Sheriffs called for volunteers, or a posse of the county. So maybe they did mean county then. Okay, if they said it here again. County before, like what I was going on about county or country, so I guess it must be county. So my error says to chase down bandits. Says this power allowed sheriffs to deputize civilians to temporarily suppress lawlessness and maintain order. Scrolling up. The Posse Comitatus Act of 1878 derives its name from this practice with a crucial distinction. It specifically prohibits the military from acting as this civilian force. The law's architects recognized that using soldiers instead of citizens for domestic law enforcement would fundamentally alter the relationship between military power and civil society. They sought to ensure that federal troops were kept out of local law enforcement. Yet this legislative barrier against using military force for domestic law enforcement is not absolute. Congress regularly makes exceptions, allowing military support to civilian law enforcement for actions such as protecting federal property, conducting domestic counter-terror operations, and engaging in counter-drug efforts. In cases related to immigration enforcement, courts have ruled the Posse Comitatus Act only prohibits direct military involvement in law enforcement actions such as detaining citizens. Well, there you go. They basically the military just can't come to your house and essentially arrest you, but these people aren't citizens. That's kind of the whole point. So support activities from transportation to surveillance remain legal. This distinction between direct enforcement and support operations provides the legal basis for Trump's proposed use of military assets in his planned deportation program. Okay, so there's number one, and next section here says military assets against illegal immigration today, U.S. troops at the southwest border. It says the military currently provides support for immigration enforcement. Today, roughly 4,000 service members assist Customs and Border Protection along the southwest border. They operate surveillance aircraft, transport Border Patrol personnel, and maintain vehicles. These activities fall within the established legal framework for military support of immigration operations, as the incoming administration has the potential to significantly expand this support role. Military aircraft could transport detainees, military installations could provide temporary housing facilities, and military personnel could assist with administrative and logistical tasks. None of these activities would violate Posse Comitatus because they do not involve direct law enforcement actions. Okay, so Trump is it looks like he's definitely surrounded himself with the people he needs to surround himself with for this, and they know what they're doing, so good. So as next section here, the Insurrection Act, a broad authority for military force. But what about using military forces to support law enforcement and enforce the law? This is where the Insurrection Act becomes crucial. The Insurrection Act, a composite of laws enacted between 1792 and 1807, represents a significant exception to the traditional separation of military and civilian law enforcement in the United States. The act grants presidents extraordinary power to deploy federal troops on American soil, a power that is typically forbidden but also vitally important to the success of federalism. The act's broad language, largely unchanged since the Civil War, allows presidents to deploy troops whenever they believe domestic unrest, rebellion, or resistance to federal law makes normal enforcement impossible. This extensive authority is rooted in Congress's constitutional power to call forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions, as described in the Constitution. The act effectively creates a presidential override of the prohibitions against using military forces for domestic law enforcement. What was initially conceived as an emergency power for a young nation now stands as a powerful tool for Trump, who might see state resistance to federal immigration enforcement as justification for military deployment. And anybody that's resisting, arrest them, because they're, the mayors, the governors, I don't care. Because isn't it treason if they do this? And it's also like, to the people out there, who are on board with the governors and the mayors standing up and resisting Trump, do you find it a little weird that they think that illegal immigrants are more important than your safety, you, the actual citizen? I mean, that should tell you something, shouldn't it? Next section says illegal immigrant safe havens, local government resistance to federal law. So this is the fun part. So some jurisdictions have already declared their intention to resist federal immigration enforcement. 6 states have already publicly announced plans to resist Trump's plan to deport thousands of undocumented immigrants. I don't know why that word twisted me up. It says, under the Insurrection Act, such resistance justifies the use of military force. So there you go. It says the deployment of military forces by a president inside the United States to enforce the law when local governments refuse to do so is not unprecedented. This happened several times during the Civil Rights era, most famously when President Dwight Eisenhower invoked the Insurrection Act to send the 101st Airborne to Little Rock, Arkansas in 1957 when state officials obstructed federal desegregation orders. So the 101st Airborne, are those the Band of Brothers guys? I mean, if so, okay, that just rang a bell for me there. Anyway, it says nearly 7 decades later, the principle remains unchanged. Local authorities cannot nullify federal law. If they attempt to do so, the president has authority to direct military power to enforce it. Invocation of the Insurrection Act in such an instance would permit American troops to detain undocumented immigrants inside the United States. The Constitution provides remedies when state and local authorities obstruct federal law enforcement. The incoming administration has legal authority to use military assets to support immigration enforcement. Those who claim otherwise misunderstand both the law and its historical context. And we're done. So there you go, folks. Looks like all the people crying foul about Trump being able to do this are completely wrong, which if you're listening to MSNBC and CNN, of course they're completely wrong. When are they ever right about anything? So anyway, let me know what you think about this in the comments below. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.